It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you had a nice weekend. Hopefully you didn't stay up and watch the second half of that game last night, because that game was ugly, not very good. A blowout from the jump. I mean, just an absolute drubbing. An absolute drubbing. It was so bad, in fact, that I think I've seen more tweets about Kendrick Lamar's halftime show than I have the game itself. Yeah, I mean, just an absolute blowout. Last week, I spent, quite a bit amount of time talking about the NBA trade deadline. And on Friday, as I do every Friday, I take time. I just kind of reflect on the previous week's shows. What did I like? What did I not like? What needs to change? All that kind of stuff. And on Friday, as I was driving home and I was thinking about the shows throughout the week, I was kicking myself. I didn't think that I had spent enough time discussing the Super Bowl. After that game last night, I'm very glad that I didn't spend more time talking about the Super Bowl, because that game wasn't close. And before I give you my full thoughts on the game, I first have to ask this question. Do we still think that the NFL games are rigged? Like, do we think that, that the referees got so sick and tired of being accused of rigging games in the Chiefs' favor that they were just like, you know what? Like, let's rig the game in the Eagles' favor. I just find it very interesting that I didn't see any tweets last night about how these games are rigged. Just something that I noticed last night while I was perusing the internet. Coming up later on in the show, Zach Pereles of CBS Sports, he's going to join me here coming up here in about 20 minutes. We're going to talk about the game last night. One of my really good buddies named Colt Booth, he's a huge Chiefs fan. I taped an interview with him last night that we're going to play. We went live pretty much right after the game. So, you get the full emotions of Chiefs fans right now, but let's talk about the game. That game wasn't close from the jump. I mean, just an absolute blowout. The Chiefs recorded a first down on their first play of the game. They hit Juju Smith-Schuster, that little 11-yard, RPO type play. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, the Chiefs are going to be able to move the football. And then, no, they didn't move the football again. They did not pick up a first down in the rest of that half. When the Eagles were up 24-0, the Kansas City Chiefs had 14 yards of total offense. I mean, I think that tells you all that you need to know right there. That game just wasn't close. The Eagles were better from start to finish going into the game. I mean, the conversation around it was pretty simple. Yes, the Eagles have the better roster. They're better in the trenches on both sides. Like top to bottom, the roster's better. But the Chiefs have Mahomes. The Eagles don't. The Chiefs have Andy Reid, and the Eagles don't. And because of that, people like me took the Chiefs. And I'll be honest, I would do it again. Like, I don't think that game last night frees me from my rule of do not bet against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. The Eagles were just the better team last night. The offensive line was dominant. The defensive line, geez Louise, were they dominant. And, like the secret is out. If you want to beat an all-time great quarterback, you have to be able to get pressure with 4. When you look at the Super Bowls that Tom Brady lost, that is what happened. The opposing team was able to generate pressure with 4. Think about those Giants games. Michael Strahan in 2007 coming off the edge. Okay, Jason Pierre-Paul coming off the other edge. And what we saw from the Eagles last night, I mean, they just dominated the line of scrimmage. Vic Fangio didn't have to blitz. He's like, we're going to run too high. Your 5 offensive linemen can't block our 4 defensive linemen. Good luck, because we're pretty sound here on the back end as well. And when you look at now the 2 Super Bowls that Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs have lost, what happened in those games? It was the two games where their offensive line got absolutely crushed. Okay, when we go back to 2020, when Tom Brady and the Buccaneers beat the Chiefs 31-9, Patrick Mahomes was sacked 3 times and hit an additional 10 times. Last night, Patrick Mahomes was sacked 6 times. He got hit an additional 11 times. Okay, like that is the recipe, which everyone knows, to beating an all-time great quarterback. You have to be able to get pressure with 4. That's just the very simple reality of it. And the Eagles did that last night. They lived in the backfield. There was a third down where the Chiefs blocked 5 offensive linemen, Travis Kelce and Isaiah Pacheco in the backfield. 7, blocking the Eagles 4. And the Eagles still got there. They still got there when the Chiefs blocked 7. I mean, just incredible. The defensive line of the Philadelphia Eagles were why they won that game last night. No way around it. The Chiefs didn't do anything well, just like, to put it kind of simply. But the one thing that they did do well was they bottled up Saquon Barkley pretty well. 25 carries for only 57 yards. Like, that's an impressive job by the Chiefs defense. Everything else could not have gone any more wrong. Jalen Hurts ended up winning the MVP last night. Super Bowl MVP. A guy who was drafted after Justin Herbert and Tua and Joe Burrow and the rest of the quarterbacks in that draft class. He's the first one to hoist a Lombardi. Pretty great for him. Like, his story's going to be everywhere. Like, growing up for me, my dad, if things didn't go my way in sports, my dad would look at me and be like, Jonathan, Michael Jordan got cut from his high school team, and that was just kind of his way of saying, like keep going, you'll get better. And for me, it's going to be, little Jonathan Jr. Jalen Hurts got benched in a national title game and came back and won a Super Bowl a few years later. So keep going. Like that's going to be a story that lives on for forever, because the path that Jalen Hurts has gone on has been really impressive, and he wins the Super Bowl MVP last night. But he shouldn't have won it. The reason why Jalen Hurts won the MVP last night was because you can't give one MVP award to the entire defensive line. Like, you can't do that. Now, to be fair, Jalen Hurts played a really good game. It was a perfect Jalen Hurts game. Outside of the interception that he threw, he couldn't have played better. In the second half, he took off a little bit more, ran when it was there, completed 17 of his 22 passes. I mean, he just was very efficient, didn't turn the ball over, didn't do anything dumb. Let's go back to 2 years ago where he played pretty great, but he had that one bad turnover that resulted in a scoop and score, and that was ultimately why they lost. He didn't have any back-breaking turnovers like that. Even the interception that he threw, the Chiefs had the ball at their own 6-yard line. Good luck going 94 yards against this Eagles defense, Kansas City. So while he played very well, I didn't think that he should have been the Super Bowl MVP. It should have gone to someone on that defensive front, probably Josh Sweat, because of how dominant he was early in that game. Once again, the Chiefs did an excellent job of limiting Saquon Barkley. 25 carries for 57 yards, but it didn't matter. And I understand the way that the Chiefs wanted to defend the Eagles. It made sense. Saquon Barkley was the offensive player of the year in the NFL. Okay? And it's like, are we going to let this guy beat us? Or are we going to let Jalen Hurts, a guy who has kind of just gotten to cruise all year because of how great Saquon Barkley has been, like, let's see if he can beat us. And Jalen Hurts was like, yeah, sure, I definitely can. And he played well. That paired with this Eagles defense doing more than their fair share led to this dominant game. Yes, the final score was 40-22, but 16 of those Chiefs points came when the Eagles were running that Gus Bradley defense. Just keep the ball, no big plays. Let's just kind of see what happens from there. But I was over this, I think, from the jump. Like, I think the Chiefs made it abundantly clear in that first quarter, really, maybe even half that time, that they weren't going to win this game. Ignore the score. Look at how the Chiefs called plays. The Chiefs only ran the football 3 times in the first half. That's it. Like, they didn't even attempt to try to control the line of scrimmage. They were just like, you know what? We're not going to be able to run the football. And they didn't. More on that here in a second. So let's just put the ball in the hands of Patrick Mahomes as much as possible and see if he can make just like a little bit of magic happen. And yeah, he couldn't. He was running for his life. It was absolutely brutal. And it's really hard to win football games when you're one-dimensional. If you can only throw the football and the defense knows that, then it's much easier to stop the pass. If you can only run the football and the defense knows that, then it becomes much easier to stop the run. And when you look at the Chiefs, I mean, it was pretty obvious from the jump that they weren't even going to attempt to run the football. Okay? They didn't. Kareem Hunt had 3 carries for 9 yards. P. Ryan had 1 carry for 8 yards. And Isaiah Pacheco had 3 carries for 7 yards. Patrick Mahomes was their leading rusher, and he had four rushes for 25 yards, and a lot of those were scrambles. I don't care who your quarterback is. If you aren't at least somewhat balanced, you aren't going to beat anybody. Like, you aren't. This was a total mismatch in the trenches on both sides of the football. I was kind of surprised at how well the Eagles' offensive line pass blocked, given how talented this defensive line is for the Chiefs. But that be, I mean, Jalen Hurts only sacked twice, had all day to throw. So it was just a complete and total mismatch in the trenches. And then you tack onto that some of the uncharacteristic things that the Chiefs did. Like, they just had they played their worst game of the season. They committed 3 penalties in the first half that extended Philadelphia drives. The Chiefs don't do that. The Chiefs play mistake-free football, and then they wait for you to make a mistake, and then they say thank you, and they beat you by 3 points because you made that one mistake. Like, the Chiefs' mantra all year has been to not make mistakes, and Mahomes threw 2 picks, and the defense committed 3 penalties that extended Philadelphia Eagle drives. You can't do that. Like, you can't do those things against a team as good as the Eagles and expect to win. You can't do it. Like, the goal has to be like, let's keep it close and let Mahomes win it late. And they didn't do that at all. And whenever games like this end, Super Bowls, NBA championship games, World Series, whatever it is, legacy always gets brought up. It is always a topic of conversation. And, like, this is what sports radio is. Like, like, if someone was to ask me, what is sports radio? I would say it's the LeBron James versus Michael Jordan GOAT argument. Like, that's what it is. And the Patrick Mahomes chase of Tom Brady, I think, falls into that category as well. And whenever games like this end, legacy becomes a topic of conversation. My opinion on Patrick Mahomes did not change after last night. He's still one of the best quarterbacks we've ever seen. Last night didn't really change that for me. I think he still has a chance to catch Tom Brady. And I'm going to say that, and people are going to get really upset, but that's fine. You be upset all you want. Tom Brady was also 3-2 record-wise in his first 5 Super Bowls. Okay, like, this I don't think it changes much of anything in terms of Patrick Mahomes' pursuit of Tom Brady. He's still technically ahead because he's played in 5, at this time in Brady's career, he'd only played in 3 Super Bowls, not 5. Okay, when I look at Andy Reid's still one of the best coaches we've ever had in the history of the NFL. Last night doesn't change that. It doesn't. Like, my perception of them both in terms of the grand scheme of the history of the NFL has not changed. They're still the best quarterback and coach combo in the NFL right now. They both just didn't grasp the GOAT title that they could have if they'd won this game, being the first team to three-peat in the history of the NFL. And three-peats are hard. Like they are, especially in the NFL. Like there's a reason why no one's ever done it. I think injuries is a large part of it. The Chiefs are having to play an offensive guard at left tackle, and they lose their number one receiver really early in the year, and and then you look at the Chiefs, or excuse me, the Eagles, who in their first playoff game had the exact same starters that they had in week 1. Being healthy is incredibly important. There's a saying that the best team in the NFL doesn't win every year. The healthiest team does. And I think that also played a role in why the Chiefs were so incredibly dominant in that game last night. Congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles. They are your Super Bowl champions. I can't wait till next year because football is the absolute best. Speaking of football being the absolute best, Zach Pereles, who's done an excellent job covering the NFL for CBS Sports all year, he's set to join me here in about 4 minutes, and we're going to talk about everything that happened in that game last night. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with Zach Pereles here in about 4 minutes. What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on
Often imitated, never duplicated. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you had a nice weekend. Hopefully last night's absolute dud of a game didn't have any impact on how good your weekend was. Joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. He has a couple articles up over on CBSSports.com about the game last night, including a winners and losers article that you should definitely check out. Zach, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good. Last night was a surprise to all of us, and a lot of people in America are probably very happy with how it turned out. But yeah, it was, I'm good, but I'm also sad that the football season's over.
Yeah, I'm in the same spot. I am curious, Zach. So I wasn't on Twitter a ton last night. I'm very curious. Like, did you see any tweets about the NFL rigging the game for the Eagles?
I did not, but I wasn't online as much either. I was working on stories, but no, I didn't. And the people who thought that it was rigged for the Chiefs, well, they also learned that is not the case.
Sorry, I find it really funny because, like, as soon as the offensive pass interference was called on A.J. Brown, I've got a good buddy of mine who's a Chiefs fan. He immediately shot me a text of, like, this win now means nothing if the Chiefs do in fact win. I am curious, joined by Zach Pereles of CBSSports.com, talking about the game last night. If you had to list all of the possible outcomes of the Super Bowl, where would Eagles win in a blowout have been on that list?
Yeah, I think it would have been pretty low, to be honest. I actually thought, like, the Eagles, the biggest thing is that they take the lead and then they win with defense and they win with running the ball. But last night, like, they didn't run the ball well, and that's what was so impressive by them is, like, if you told me way down there on the list of maybe the fifth or sixth most likely outcome, Eagles run away with it, I would have thought they ran away with it and Saquon Barkley just went crazy. But instead, it was the defense and it was Jalen Hurts leading the way. And so for it to be a blowout was way low on my list, but for it to be a blowout in this manner was even lower.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, just absolute, like, the final score being 40-22 doesn't fully indicate how big of a blowout this was. It's really more like 40-6, just the way that the Eagles played defense late. I found it interesting that Jalen Hurts won the MVP of the game. Like, he played really well. Let me say that first. But I didn't think he was the MVP. I thought it was Howie Roseman and just the way that he constructed this just amazing roster. Is he the best general manager in the NFL?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to argue with that, especially after last night. I think a big thing that people should realize about the Eagles is that they are super duper aggressive. They extend players early. They are very aggressive in free agency. And when you're that aggressive, there's going to be some big swings and misses, but there are going to be some huge hits. Like, that is what Howie Roseman has done. They've obviously drafted well. They have terrific coaching, and that, it all works together. Like, Howie Roseman is really, really good. And then he looks really good because the coaching is good. And, so it all kind of falls in line, and you can argue the chicken or the egg there. But yeah, I think when you look at the guys who helped them win last night, who were literally just acquired over the offseason, Saquon Barkley, Josh Sweat, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, Zach Bond, like, those are guys who are our stars already. And, like, some of them are rookies. Some of them, like Saquon, were the big free agents that the Eagles were like, it doesn't matter what his position is. He's a guy who impacts the game at such a high level. He kind of transcends positional value. So I really do think, like, Howie Roseman, take a bow, enjoy the parade. Like, so much that you did this year worked, and it really has. That's the thing. It has worked for a long time. Like, you now think of the Eagles, this is 2 Super Bowls in 8 seasons. this was their third trip in 8 seasons. Like, it, other than the Chiefs, it doesn't really get a whole lot better than that in this era of football.
Joined by Zach Pereles, who covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com. And as you mentioned, 3 trips in the last 8 seasons, a very different roster for all 3 trips as well, which once again speaks to Howie Roseman and how great of a job he's done. You mentioned Barkley there and Roseman going out and signing him. How does Saquon Barkley being a major contributor to a Super Bowl winning team, how do you think that impacts the running back market and the way that teams view running backs going forward?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Like, the Eagles had an identity, and it was not an identity that a lot of people thought still worked in the NFL, and it actually was interesting to see not just Saquon, but Derrick Henry. Like, it is a huge, huge, like, you have to be able to run the ball. It was one of these things where the NFL drifted so pass heavy that defenses were like, all right, we're going to get really light and we're going to play all these linebackers who are basically big safeties. And then the Eagles this year were like, you want to play these small boxes, you want to do this and try to limit our passing game, we will pound the rock with you over and over and over again. So you're starting to see a tiny bit, not a full swing back to, the old days of run the ball up the middle, but you are certainly starting to see, like, if you have a game-breaking running back, that is a complete game changer, because then defenses are stuck with, oh my goodness, like, we don't have the personnel to deal with this. And then when we try to put the personnel on the field to deal with this, the Eagles still have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and Jalen Hurts. So I do really think that I'm going to be really interested. This is a strong running back draft class. So I am interested to see, like, is there a little bit more of an emphasis? It's obviously a great thing for the running back market. And I think that when you see a team that just does it a little bit differently than anyone else, I think I saw a stat, one of our great researchers at CBS, Doug Clawson, said that this was the first Super Bowl winning team to have more rushing yards than passing yards in a season since, I think, like the mid-'70s Steelers. So when you talk about, things kind of swinging from pass to run, pass when we can, this is kind of leading the way there. And I think it will absolutely change how running backs are seen, not just as running backs, but as playmakers, as guys who impact the defense so much that the defense has to fundamentally change what it does.
Joined by Zach Pereles, who covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com, talking about the Super Bowl last night, the Eagles just dominating from start to finish. And, like, watching the Eagles front four dominate the Chiefs offensive line, like, it makes some sense, right? Because we knew going into that game how deep the Eagles were on, their defensive line. You've got, the Chiefs have an offensive guard playing left tackle, and like it makes sense for the Eagles defensive line to dominate that much. I was very surprised though that, we all know how great the Eagles offensive line is as well, but like the Chiefs have like legitimately impactful defensive linemen, and they were stonewalled, especially in their pass rush. Were you surprised by the lack of amount of pressure that the Chiefs were able to put on Hurts?
A little bit. The pass rush, you're right. They do have some really talented guys, but it had kind of been up and down all season, and especially when they weren't blitzing. You talk about a team that it wasn't always there, that pass rush, and then Charles Menahue came back, and that helped. And you talk about, obviously, Chris Jones is a Hall of Famer, but that Eagles front is so well coached. And when you give them 2 weeks to prepare, they just looked prepared for everything. There was basically the one bad play Jalen Hurts made all night was that Steve Spagnuolo special blitz where the Eagles were just completely confused up front and Jalen Hurts throws a really bad interception. But that's like really the only one that sticks out to me in terms of like the Eagles creating confusion. And that is a real surprise because that was a huge knock on Jalen Hurts early in his career. Was he struggles a little bit when the picture gets a little bit muddy and he doesn't know where the blitzer is coming from. And then this year he has become a blitz killer, which I think really kind of evened out what Steve Spagnuolo wants to do. Jalen Hurts was so good, just like getting the ball out, being on time, and then eventually it opened up where he started to hit some of those big plays as well. So back to your original question, I don't think that I was surprised because they did get there a couple of times. They obviously did force the one turnover. If this game is close or if the Chiefs win, you're talking about, hey, the defense didn't really do a bad job, especially considering all the bad situations they were put in. But I just think it's a testament to the Chiefs that I'm not surprised that they perform this, or it's a testament to the Eagles that I'm not surprised that they perform this well.
We've talked a lot about this Eagles roster and how great it was coming into the season. They were incredibly healthy going into the playoffs. I'm just going to ask this question as bluntly as I can. Is Nick Sirianni a good head coach?
Yeah, I think that he is. And I think it's just, this is one of the things that I actually kind of thought about last night. You know, they had Sean McVay on the pregame show, however many pregame shows they had. He was on one of them. And he said that Nick Sirianni is the most disrespected head coach in all of football. And I think part of that is because of, you know, his temper can run hot and his emotions can run really high. And that's just not what we think of when we think of head coaches being these really composed guys. But I think like that fire can work when you also have the right guys in the locker room. You think about like Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, those are very even keeled, mellow kind of guys. And you kind of got that fire and ice sort of leadership. I think he is a really good coach. And I think that he has the right people around him too. Like he got the right offensive coordinator in there in Kellen Moore. I'm going to be interested to see where they go there because it sounds like he's leaving for the Saints. They definitely got the right defensive coordinator there in Vic Fangio. They had the right people in the locker room in terms of coaches and then obviously like the players I mentioned. So I think he is a really good head coach. Like he has found the guys around him to make his style work. And so you have to credit him for finding the right coaches. You obviously credit Howie Roseman for finding the right players. And then, yeah, Nick Sirianni, like you can't argue with the results anymore. He is a good coach and he has a really good team and the right pieces in place.
Joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports talking about the Super Bowl last night, more specifically Nick Sirianni, who's taken a lot of heat. How does, you were talking about how he has the right coaches around him. Does it matter at all that Howie Roseman was the guy who hired Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore and didn't really give Nick Sirianni much of a say in that this year?
I don't think it matters too much to me. I always think like coaches are one of these, it's one of these things where coaches get all the blame when things don't go well, and then they get a ton of the credit, they get none of the credit when things go well. So Nick Sirianni getting a ton of blame last year when things really went downhill. And I think that he deserves way more credit for rallying things together. Obviously we're not in the locker room. We don't know exactly what he did, but whatever he did, it worked. And I think that to me, it doesn't really matter who makes the hires because at the end of the day, like Nick Sirianni has to make it work. And he did.
You're right. He did. He figured it out. And it's just, I think he's got like the highest winning percentage of any active coach in the NFL right now, which is absolutely insane. Joined by Zach Pereles, who covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com. He has an article out talking about winners and losers of the Super Bowl. You should definitely go and check that out. How does this loss last night from Mahomes, how does this impact the Mahomes and Brady comparison that we're probably going to be doing for the next decade?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I think that, we look at Patrick Mahomes' 2 Super Bowl losses and we see the one to Tom Brady's Buccaneers, and we think, he got no help from his pass catchers and the offensive line was absolutely destroyed. And he was really young and he's playing against, who the guy who we still consider the GOAT. And we kind of give him a pass there. This one, you can't give him a pass. I understand the offensive line, again, was completely overwhelmed, and the receiving options were not great other than Xavier Worthy. And even then, all of his production came in garbage time. But there were plays in this game where Patrick Mahomes looked like, that like college sort of Patrick Mahomes sort of running around and trying to make hero plays. And he made a few, but the biggest one to me that sticks out is the interception to Cooper DeJean that DeJean takes back for pick six. That's like a no, like you're doing everything wrong. And then he makes those moments right at the last second. But this one was like wrong the whole time. And you could just tell, like, there were a couple dropbacks early in the game within like maybe the third, fourth drive where he's dropping back and he is seeing pressure before the pressure is there, and he's sensing pressure before the pressure is there, and his feet are a little bit happy and he's already kind of looking to escape. So it just like, this is a kind of, for now, definitely a legacy changer. Obviously he is still a top whatever quarterback of all time. And I'm confident in saying that already, but this one really changes it in terms of just like, you always thought he was going to have an answer because he always has. But at some point it was like, not can the Chiefs score? It's like, can the Chiefs cross midfield? Can the Chiefs like can the Chiefs string together like 3 first downs? And the answer was no for the entire meaningful part of the game. So I think when you think about all-time greatness, you maybe give him a pass for that first one. Like I said, like, he was completely overwhelmed. The pass catchers were awful. The offensive line was awful. But this one, this is sort of a like, this is a tough one. This is a tough one for him. The one thing we do know is he will bounce back and he will continue to build that legacy. But we're talking about the here and now, and this is a big one in terms of it just changes who we think Patrick Mahomes is a tiny bit. He's now 3-2 in Super Bowls, and he has 2 blowout losses. And, if this one had been closer, if he had played really well and they had lost, then maybe you don't think of his legacy changing that much. But this was a tough one that he has to take on the chin. And he said after the game, like, I have to be better. And I do think that he will be. I think the Chiefs will be better because, as we've seen, like, they know how to bounce back from tough losses. And when you play this late in the season, it's either a championship or a really tough loss.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Joined by Zach Pereles, who covers the NFL over at CBSSports.com, talking about the Super Bowl last night. And you're exactly right. It's really tough to defend everything that happened last night and the fact that it was a blowout loss. Him being 3-2, I'm seeing it everywhere. And I just want to remind everyone that, like, Tom Brady was 3-2 in his first 5 Super Bowls as well. Obviously, his 2 losses much closer, but the record's still not really all that different. I want to go back to last year, and the Chiefs find a way to win the whole thing with a team that wasn't very good, or at least not very talented. And I think there was this consensus opinion of, oh, don't worry, like they'll be a lot better next year. They're going to fix everything, and I think that it's just natural to assume that because they have Mahomes and Andy Reid. And, like, were they better this year than last year? Yes. But they still had a lot of issues. Like, do you expect for the Chiefs to be better next year? Where do you think they're where do you think they have to be better? And do you think that they will be better going into this next season?
Yeah, so I think, it's hard to be better than 15-2, and I get that, and they went to the Super Bowl. Like, everyone thought this is the year to get the Chiefs, and that's what's so hilarious about it is, like, if you're sitting at home and you're like a Bills fan, you're like, we lost to these Chiefs again. Like, I always think it's tough to, view things in such a black and white lens of, like, Mahomes is 3-2 in Super Bowls. How about the fact that he's been to 5? Like, nobody under 30 had been to more than 3 before Patrick Mahomes came along. So in terms of next year, I think that they will find ways to be, I don't know if they'll be better, but I think that they'll be different, and that will help them maybe be more prepared. I think the first thing will be the offensive line. This was a team that had 3 Pro Bowl offensive linemen, and somehow they're going to upgrade that position. That's interestingly like the one area that they've kind of missed out on in the draft. They draft so well, but they have missed on their tackles, which forced Joe Tooney to go play left tackle, and he struggled there. He was really good there, but he struggled there last night. And then they have a backup left guard in because Tooney had to bump out, and their right tackle, Jawan Taylor, struggled. So I think that the first thing that they're going to absolutely overhaul is the line. They have 3 studs there. It depends if Trey Smith comes back, but they're going to make upgrades there. And then I think the Rashee Rice element is going to be a big one. Like last year when that offense just looked stuck in the mud, Rashee Rice was like, it seemed like everything was just like Rashee Rice mesh route and hope that he runs far after he catches the ball. I think that like there is a positive to take away in Xavier Worthy. And I think that you're finally going to see like not the Tyreek Hill Chiefs, but you're going to see more elements of that deep ball, especially when Rashee Rice comes back and can give someone the defense really has to respect in that short and intermediate game. So I do think that they will be better offensively. They obviously are going to have to remake that line. And then defensively, I still think they're really good. I still think they're well coached. I'm going to be interested to see what they do there, but this was a really good defense all year. And it just, they were on the field the entire game against the Chiefs. And I didn't think that they did a bad job. Like they created a turnover, which Jalen Hurts has not turned the ball over like at all since like early October. He's just not turned the ball over. They forced a turnover. They limited Saquon Barkley. Like, you can't really pin this one on the defense, even though 40 points is a lot. I just think that they will be better next year because they will look a little bit different. I'm interested to see if Travis Kelce is back, and if he is back, I don't think he's going to be as huge a part of the offense, but he still can be a reliable guy. It's just he can't be your 1 or your 1A anymore. I don't think. He can be here or there, safety blanket, and he can still be a really good safety blanket because he has such good chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. But I think you're just going to see a little bit of a shift in terms of maybe we upgrade the offensive line. Maybe we become a little bit better of a running team, and maybe Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy start to, we talk about the first iteration was Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and then the second iteration was kind of more Travis Kelce and insert some wide receiver who steps up here. And now maybe this third iteration is going to be Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy leading the way, and Travis Kelce maybe settling into that like tertiary role. So I do think they're going to be certainly very good. The defense is so good and so well coached, and you have Patrick Mahomes, who, like, the guy just went to a Super Bowl. How much bad stuff can we say about him?
3 in a row. I mean, yeah, I think you're exactly right. Joined by Zach Pereles of CBS Sports, talking about the Super Bowl and just everything that happened last night. I'm with you. Like, they should be better just because, Rashee Rice is going to be back. Xavier Worthy kind of had a similar season to Rashee Rice last year. Not very much production in the first half of the season, and then in the second half of the season, he really kind of came on strong. The Travis Kelce piece is very intriguing because, like you said, he has great chemistry with Mahomes, but I think he's 35 right now. Going back 7 years ago, like, he was great against man coverage because he was faster than linebackers and bigger than safeties and all the prototypical stuff that we say about tight ends when they're at their peak. He's just not that guy anymore. But like against zone coverage, because of the chemistry that he has and the feel that he has, he can probably still get open. But I like you, I'm very intrigued to kind of see what the Chiefs do with him going forward. Last question for you, Zach, and I'll let you go. Are the Eagles going to be good enough to repeat next season?
Are they going to be good enough? Certainly on paper, they have everything that you need. And I think that, that starts with Jalen Hurts, like Super Bowl MVP. The other Super Bowl he went to, he had one of the best performances ever by a Super Bowl losing quarterback. Like, if you have a quarterback, you have a chance. And the Eagles, for all the stuff that Jalen Hurts gets, and I understand the stats don't look great, and there are times where you should have legitimate, quibbles and criticisms of his play. He is extremely consistent in terms of just showing up in big games. And I really do think that that's where it all starts. And then you just talk about insane amounts of talent all over the defense and offense. Like, this roster is so good. They extend guys early, and then if they hit, they have guys on great contracts. They are one of the most aggressive teams. They will certainly be aggressive again. I don't even know what they need to be aggressive on, but I'm sure that they'll be aggressive on something. And, the NFL changes a ton every year, and you never want to get ahead of yourselves, but just based on the talent alone, like, there's no reason, barring injuries or all these other things, there's no reason that they can't be right in contention there. I certainly think they're the deserved, favorites, especially after what we watched last night. Like, that is an absolute domination 1 week after, or 2 weeks after dominating in a championship game. Like, how could it not be the Eagles as the favorites going forward? And I think a lot of teams are going to be looking at this Eagles team and trying to say, how can we, replicate that? Because they absolutely have everything that you could want in a roster. And it seems like they have the coaching stuff down. There's obviously going to be the questions about who's their next offensive coordinator, and that will be a huge hire. But yeah, right now it's Eagles, and it's Eagles right now, and it's going to be Eagles as the presumptive favorites until we see otherwise, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, just with how dominant they were. I don't know how they're not the favorite for next season. So now with the NFL season over, what are you going to be writing about going forward over there on CBSSports.com?
Yeah, a lot of college basketball. Obviously, the tournament is now a little bit over a month away. That'll be my biggest focus. Still going to be doing plenty of NFL offseason stuff. I think I'm going to be interested to see like what the Chiefs do next. We sort of talked about the first part of the dynasty, the second part of the dynasty. Now, is there a third evolution? But it's going to be a lot of college basketball. I love college basketball. Like, I think people should start paying attention before March because it's so much fun every weekend. This past weekend we saw number 1 and number 2 in men's basketball go down. Like, does it get a whole lot better than that? I don't think so. So a lot of college basketball, and I'm still writing the CBS Sports HQ newsletter. So those will be the 2 main focuses, but NFL never really goes away.
That's exactly right. Zach, thanks for your time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That is Zach Pereles of CBS Sports. You can read all this stuff over at CBSSports.com. We come back here in about 3 minutes. I've got some brief thoughts on IU basketball.
Unfiltered takes live here. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Coming up here in 9 minutes, one of my good friends, Colt Booth, he's going to join the show, or we're going to play back an interview that I did with him last night. He is a huge Chiefs fan. We'll get the Chiefs fan perspective on the game last night. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Twitter, the Indy Sports Ticket app, however you are listening. Indiana not blown out, but blown out in the first half on Saturday. Okay, they ended up losing to Michigan by 3. Shout out to Anthony Leal for helping Hoosier bettors to cover on that half court heave there right before the end of the game. No way around it. This Indiana basketball team just isn't very good. No way around it. They aren't very good, and Mike Woodson took his, probably not enough of the blame after the game.
We haven't been the same team, for a while. And for whatever reasons, it's, we've dug a hole, and I've done a terrible job in really putting them in the best position possible to win, I think. And, but emotionally, these kids have taken a beating a little bit, and it's my job to try to lift their spirits and keep them heading in the right direction, man, because it's still a lot of basketball left. 7 games is a lot of games, man. And we're still trying to play to stay in the Big Ten tournament, and then see where that takes us. But we got to start winning some games here soon to do that.
Dang right, Coach Woodson. That is Mike Woodson talking about how this team has to start winning games at some point. And Coach Woodson said there in that clip that he's just done a terrible job at putting his players in the best position to win. And that is clear as day. And it's incredibly important for this team because they just aren't very talented. Like, you look at Purdue, who doesn't have a ton of talent on their team either, but they're always in the correct spot. Like Purdue doesn't have a player on their roster that is a definite first-round NBA draft pick. They win a ton of games, though, because their players are fundamentally sound. They're always in the correct spot on both ends of the floor. And then you look at IU, and they aren't very talented either. And their players are never in the right spot. And that's on Coach Woodson. I see people tweet this all the time during IU games. They say that you can't play 2 bigs together in college basketball, which is just not true. You can play 2 bigs together. Like Malik Renew and Omar Ballo can share the floor and be a net positive. That can't happen. The coach, Mike Woodson, just has to figure out a way to make sure that they don't get in each other's way offensively. And you have to be sure that you can guard on the defensive end of the floor. Mike Woodson just can't figure it out. Yet he keeps playing these 2 big lineups, which I don't mind. Just figure out how to make sure that they aren't in each other's way. The Hoosiers, they wound up getting crushed in that first half against Michigan. They weren't making shots. They weren't getting stops. They were down 43-27. I turned it off. I ended up having to go back later and watch the second half because I just kind of figured that they would roll over. They didn't, though, to their credit. They fought back. They had a chance late, but, they just dug themselves into too deep of a hole. And I was surprised that they fought back. It seemed like this was when they were going to quit. And I'll be honest, it was nice to see them compete a little bit. But this team just isn't talented enough to beat teams like Michigan. Like, the fact that Anthony Leal's having to start and play 30 minutes a night is not a good sign. Like, yeah, he's a good player, plays hard, but there are some nights where when he plays, Indiana's running 4-on-5 offense. Like, he's usually a 0. And sure, he has some nights where he makes some shots, but that doesn't really happen very often. Trey Galloway is a guy that they rely on to score and initiate offense. He's had 1 year in his 5-year career where he's averaged double figures. Miles Rice was supposed to be the guy that made this IU engine go. And, we'll always have that Tennessee scrimmage. And he's played his way out of the rotation. He played 12 minutes against Michigan. He got pulled against Purdue as well. He's just not a very good player. Mackenzie Mbako is the only legitimately talented player on this team. He's the only player that on this roster for IU that looks like a Big Ten player somewhat consistently. Omar Ballo these last 2 games has just completely disappeared. Malik Renew's been up and down, and that might be in part because of the injury, but he hasn't looked like a Big Ten big this year. He looked better against Michigan on Saturday, but that feels like the first time in forever that he's actually played well. Okay, like there was this idea coming into the season that Indiana was uber talented, and they aren't. And Luke Goody made a comment about it earlier in the season about how talented this team was. And Mike Woodson was asked yesterday why the talent that Luke Goody, of all people, claimed that they have, why that hasn't translated into them winning more games. Here's what Coach Woodson had to say about that.
I wish I knew, as the coach, your roster's changing every year, and that's no excuse. And you think you putting the right pieces in play. And I think our guys got wonderful intentions, man, and they do want to win. But it hadn't worked out that way the last 3-4 weeks for our ball club. So, my job again as the coach is to continue to push them and keep them in a good frame of mind, and hopefully something good will click. And we need to get a game under their belt so they can start feeling good about themselves.
Mike Woodson right there talking about why the talent that this Indiana team, why it hasn't translated to wins. Look, first, I'm sure that your team wants to win, Coach Woodson. Everyone wants to win because losing sucks. Second, your roster didn't change that much. Malik Renew, Mackenzie Mbako, Trey Galloway, and Anthony Leal are all back from last year. All 5 of those players played important minutes for you last year, and they're doing it again this year. The only new guys are Omar Ballo, Miles Rice, Bryson Tucker, and Kanan Carlisle, even though Bryson Tucker hasn't played a ton this year, neither has, Carlisle. Like, those are the only 4 players that at least somewhat play. Like, your roster didn't change that much. It's another poor excuse from Coach Woodson. Hopefully, whoever comes in to coach this next Hoosiers team understands that rosters change every year. When we come back here in like a minute or so, more stuff on the Super Bowl. My good buddy Colt, who's a Chiefs fan, he joined me for an interview last night. I'm going to run that for you when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
It's time for the real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
The real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Maybe you're watching on YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. You can watch the live stream there. You can hop in the chat to be part of the conversation. You can also watch on Twitter at __ Jonathan Smith if you want to follow me there and watch the stream there. You can also listen via the Indie Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps, or you can just listen via 1430 AM. So last night, the Eagles crushed the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. One of my best friends, his name's Colt Booth, huge Chiefs fan, and he agreed to do an interview with me here on the show. The issue is he lives in Portland, and he didn't want to get up super early this morning, so we taped an interview last night right after the game. My brain was a little frazzled, but I think it's pretty good just to kind of get a Chiefs fan perspective on the loss last night. Here is my interview with my good friend Colt Booth, who's a huge Chiefs fan, talking about the Super Bowl game last night. What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. A little bit of a different setup. Doing this interview right after the Super Bowl finish, joined by my good friend Colt, who is a Chiefs fan.
Yeah, man, it's good to be here. I love that. And the first time that I come on is right after the team that I love loses the Super Bowl, and that's when you asked me to join. So that's great of you.
Well, originally the plan was for them to win, and then to have you on. And I invited you on right before your wedding, which was my bad, entirely my bad. Just me being dumb sports guy, only thinking about my show. That's a classic thing of that. But thanks for your time. So let me just to kind of let the audience know, because we've talked a decent amount throughout the season, just kind of on your thoughts on the Chiefs. You weren't entirely bought into the 3P. What were your thoughts before the game tonight?
I mean, before the game, as I'm sure most people thought, I looked at who the team has been this year, and I haven't really believed in them all year. I didn't think they would beat the Bills, if they should have. I didn't think they would beat the Ravens if that's who they were going to play. And I said, okay, if the Kansas City wins, like, what is the outcome? And there's only one way, which is the three most important people on a game day are your offensive play caller, your defensive play caller, and your quarterback. And I think you could pretty confidently go into this game saying offensively, definitely, quarterback, definitely, DC, maybe a toss-up, but we'll give it to Kansas City because of the history. And then the game started, and you realize, oh, you know what? The most important person on a team is the general manager. And ultimately, Howie Roseman just beat Brett Veach today when you look at how the game played out.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I thought it was interesting early, joined by my good friend Colt Booth, who's a huge Chiefs fan and isn't obnoxious in any way, shape, or form about it. I thought it was very telling that the Chiefs only ran the ball 3 times in the first half. Like, there was never any attempt whatsoever to even let their offensive line try to control the game. Did you expect that to happen? Because when you got an offensive guard playing left tackle, that's not a good start in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, was I expecting 3 rushes? No, of course not, right? But I was not that type of script of very, very pass heavy, not relying on the run. Yeah, that didn't surprise me. I mean, you look at how they've gone through the playoffs. That's been what it's been towards the end of the regular season. That's been what it's been. And I think it was a good decision to move Tooney to tackle. The problem was with doing that is the strength of their offensive line was up the middle, right? They had problems with their tackles all season. So if you're going to run the ball, you run the ball downhill behind your 3 best offensive linemen. But when you kick Tooney out, okay, your pass protection gets a little bit better, right? I think that's the right call. They had to do that. But the downside of that is, hey, we're not going to be able to run the ball as well. We have a backup guard now starting there. And so especially when you look at the defensive tackle group, defensive line in general that the Eagles have, I was definitely thinking this was going to be a pass-heavy script. And so it didn't surprise me. But, I mean, ultimately, man, you can nitpick on play calls and running the ball. It didn't matter. It wasn't going to matter tonight. They just got whooped.
Yeah, which was I picked the Chiefs before the game because I'm not picking against Mahomes. I still don't think I'm willing to come off of that rule even after seeing this. But no one expected this. Like, no one
No.
expected for it to be 40-22. No one expected, for the Chiefs to really only score when the Eagles employed what we like to call here in Indy the Gus Bradley defense, where it's just like we're going to run base coverage and let you just kind of do whatever. Like, I'm not surprised that the Eagles had the advantages in the trenches. I just didn't think it would be this bad. I mean, Mahomes gets sacked 6 times. Hurts only twice. Hurts, by the way, played outstanding. Did you expect for him to play that well?
No, look, I'm not some super football guy, so there'll be people listening, feel free to disagree with my football takes. I'm not going to pretend to be somebody that knows a lot of X's and O's. I honestly wasn't blown away by Hurts in this game. But he didn't need to be, right? Like you look at what happened, like he didn't need to be. Like in the first half he ran for 25 yards. It's not like he had a couple big runs towards the beginning of the second half. At that point the game's over, and he had a good ball to Devontae Smith. That was great, right? I think the thing you can say about him was when you needed the big throws to AJ Brown, he nailed them, right? Like that is what he needed to do in order to win the game, and he did it. But I don't think this is a Hurts amazing game. I mean, we might want to get into this of I don't think he should have been the MVP, not because I don't think he played great, but he's not the reason that they won. And so, yeah, he played well, but he played a good Jalen Hurts game.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Like you said, he didn't have to be great when your defense is that dominant. Joined by my good friend Colt Booth, who is a huge Chiefs fan. Is huge a good adjective there?
I think so. And look, I am open about the fact that I would classify myself as a bandwagon Chiefs fan. I think I have a reason for being so, but I'm from the Lubbock area in Texas. Pat Mahomes went to Texas Tech. We don't have very many guys go play pro ball at Texas Tech. So whenever he was getting drafted, I decided, hey, wherever he goes, I'm in. And so, yes, I'm a bandwagon Chiefs fan. That said, I was a bandwagon the year before. Everyone else was bandwagon, so I think I get a little bit of credit for that. But yeah, I mean, in the last 6-7 years, I have become a huge Chiefs fan. I've watched pretty much every game in the last 7 years. So I do love this team, and it has moved just from Mahomes to the Chiefs. And so yeah, man, it hurts. We're not feeling great tonight, which is probably really comforting to hear for most of your audience that the Chiefs fans are feeling bad. I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest. Eagles fans are so much worse. Like I was pulling for the Chiefs pretty hard tonight because Eagles fans are just they're terrible. You said you mentioned though Hurts winning the MVP and how you wouldn't have given it to him. I agree. I just don't think that you can give one MVP award out to 4 people. like the Eagles won that game because their defensive line was awesome. Like, do you just give it to Josh Sweat because he had the most sacks?
Well, I think when we look at the MVP, and I think most people say, okay, well, who you look at the whole game entirely. The whole game for this game was the first half because it was over after halftime. I mean, it's Mahomes, so you have a little bit of like, oh, maybe we'll see what when they come out their first possession. But if we're honest with ourselves, like the game was over in the first half. And so who influenced the way the game went the most in the first half? I think it was Josh Sweat. Like you look at the pressure and the sacks that he was able to get, and Hurts ended up putting up numbers and having rushing numbers, and I get that, but the game was already over. And so who influenced the game, who put them in a position to get it out of the way? You're right that it was kind of the whole unit. Honestly, the MVP, as I said earlier, is Howie Roseman, the general manager of the Eagles, like just putting together an absolute unit on both sides of the ball, but especially on the line. But if I had to pick one person, I'd say, hey, Josh Sweat influenced the game when the game was still in balance more than anybody else on the field.
Joined by my really good friend Colt Booth, all the way up in Portland, Oregon, which is just I love that you're a Chiefs fan. I think this is great. What do you think the Bills and the Ravens and Josh Allen and the rest of those organizations, what do you think they're thinking right now? Just like watching this and just asking themselves, like, why can't we do that?
Well, it's, what was the adage with Brady when he was at his best, right? What do you have to do with Brady in order to beat Brady? Hey, get pressure with 4, right? That's what you got to do. And it's like, no duh, right? Like, of course, if you can get pressured with 4, you're going to win. Like, that's an absolute cheat code to be able to do that. And so the fact that the Eagles, Brady said it on the broadcast, like they didn't blitz a single time tonight. They didn't call a single blitz, and they got 6 sacks. And so, I mean, what you're thinking is two things. I think one, okay, we just have to draft and sign in free agency an incredible defensive line. No problem, right? That's really easy to do. Everybody knows that. And then the other thing is, hey, if you're going to beat Mahomes, you have to kill him in early, right? You look at, I mean, he's lost 4 games in the postseason, and 2 of those in the Super Bowl with Tampa Bay and now tonight, which those 2 games tonight and against Tampa Bay, they're incredibly similar games in my mind. You have to kill him early, because if he hangs around, he gets a chance, magic's going to happen. But when you do this, it's kind of over. And of course, when you say that, it's like, well, duh, like that, it's just actually being able to do that is really, really hard.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like building, I mean, like the Eagles defensive line, once again, joined by my good friend Colt Booth, who's a Chiefs fan and is taking some time to talk about the game. Thank you again. And the thing about the Eagles is, like, they're not just 4 deep. Like, they have like 6 or 7 legitimately like they've got 3 or 4 guys who could go start somewhere else that don't even start for them. And that is just not a common thing. Like, if, obviously I feel like the Chiefs had played are the Eagles the only team in the NFL, or at least in the NFC, that you feel like the Chiefs wouldn't have had a chance to beat because of that defensive line? Like, if they had played the Lions or someone else, how different is the game?
Yeah, I think very. I think the Lions too, it's hard just because of how injured they were at the end of the year, right? Like, and especially where those injuries are, the questions were what? The defensive line. And so if you're not able to pressure Mahomes like this, then yeah, I do think the game goes very, very differently. And I'm not sure, if there's other teams that could have done that in the same way. And so, yeah, especially have a chance. Yeah, the Chiefs have a chance against anybody. I mean, you play the Eagles again, you have a chance. But yeah, I don't think there's anybody who would have been able to do what the Eagles did, or maybe even get close to doing what the Eagles just did. Like, I don't want like, it's easy to think of the end of the game and it was a blowout and whatever. Like, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this was one of the most dominant performances we've ever seen in a championship game of any sport. Like, you look at the final score of 48-22, it's 40-6. Like, when you think about this game in your mind, think 40-6, because that's what it was. The plays at the end of the game, like, okay, you get, the long throw to Worthy, whatever. The game's over. The defense doesn't care, and so it was an absolute blowout. It was just incredible what happened.
Joined by my good friend Colt Booth, who is a Chiefs fan. So the Eagles defensive line playing as well as they did isn't the most surprising thing. I was surprised, though. Like, the Eagles offensive line, it's one of the 2 best in the NFL. It's them or it's the Lions. But that being said, like, this Chiefs defensive line's pretty good. Like, Karlaftis, Chris Jones, who seemed a little banged up. Were you surprised at how much they struggled to generate pressure on Hurts?
I was, and it's one of those things where I guess, which you can see in the stats, they decided, hey, Barkley's not going to beat us, right? That is what they decided as a defense, and that's what you should have decided going into this game. I think they played it, like, game plan wise, what you should have done. And when you do that, you're inevitably going to have to give some things up. And I guess one of the things maybe they thought they could do more with blitzes or whatever it may be, but I was surprised that there was nothing. I wasn't expecting, 4 or 5 sacks or anything like that, but the fact that there was next to no pressure. I mean, Hurts had all day to throw. Yeah, it did surprise me that it was that imbalanced. But, goes to show what kind of team and plan the Eagles had and how they were ready.
Like you said, they're just really good. Like you said, Howie Roseman just did an awesome job building this team. Does that mean that Nick Sirianni's still a bad coach?
So I was thinking about this before the game and during the game, and yeah, I think so. Well, I don't know if he's bad. I'm not going to say he's a bad coach, but how many coaches would you pick in front of him still? This changed nothing. I don't think about him any differently after this game than I did before. And, you know, it's not really, I mean, it is kind of on him, but when at the beginning of the season, the general manager is like, hey, I'm hiring your offensive and defensive coordinator for you, and you have no say in the matter. Like, it was always going to go this way. If they win, other people are going to get credit. If they lose, it's going to be on him. And so, I don't know, man. He kept them together. I guess there were times this year where the team didn't seem to like each other some. So it's like, I don't really know what you do here, but dude, you won a trophy. So that's off to him.
Yeah. Joined by my good friend Colt Booth, who is a Chiefs fan, talking about the Chiefs and the Eagles. Two more questions for you, and I'll let you go. By the way, when I say that, it's usually more than two. So looking at the Chiefs, like they had some injuries. You know, Rice gets hurt early. I think they leaned on Kelsey just throughout the season, and especially in the playoffs. I think a little more than what they wanted to. How different do the Chiefs look next year, and what specifically about them do you think will be different?
It is going to be an interesting. I was texting our other friend Zach is also a big Chiefs fan, and I was texting him during the game, and you know it'll be interesting to see what it looks like. I think weapons wise, Rice coming back, Worthy, it kind of seems to be on the Rice developmental track, which is not doing much the first half of the season as a rookie, and really comes on in the second half. And so, you know, the potential of having both of those guys helps a lot. Kelsey, I have no idea. Like, does he come back again? And even if he does, in the regular season, like he's shown this year and last year, like, hey, he's kind of coasting into the playoffs. And so, you know, does Noah Gray, like, as a Chiefs fan, he's a guy that a lot of Chiefs fans are like, you know, hey, he's actually pretty good. But like when you put him in that number one tight end position, is he going to be that? Probably not. And then the real question, and it's interesting because these conversations, I feel like you could go back after the Tampa Bay Super Bowl and people are having the exact same conversations, right? What do you do on the offensive line? How do you protect Patrick Mahomes? That has to be your number one priority of what you're going to do to fix, you know, that situation. And so, yeah, we'll see. I don't know enough right now about contract status of different guys. Obviously, that'll be into it too. And, you know, there's also the question of Rice, like, is a suspension coming or not from the NFL from some of the stuff that happened this offseason? So I don't think it'll look drastically different. I do think there is a chance they are better next year, though.
It feels like they should be. Like, it felt like so much of the season, it was Mahomes, Andy Reid, a little bit of Kelsey, Chris Jones, and a really good back end of that defense kind of making the majority of the plays. Because if I remember correctly, like Nick Bolton missed some time, and he's a good player. But then again, like last year, I think we felt like this team would be much better this year. And while I think they were better than last year, it didn't feel like they made a big leap. But at the same time, how much of this do you think is we just kind of expect for Andy Reid and Mahomes to figure it out?
I think that's a big thing. But what I'm really interested to see is where is motivation and desire and push for this team next year? Like, there is a reason that no one has won 3 Super Bowls in a row. And the ability to play long seasons and have short off seasons and come back and to have the motivation, which maybe this helps on the motivation front, right? Getting absolutely whooped and saying, hey, we don't want this to happen again, you know? But I will not be surprised if there's kind of a slow start to next year of we poured everything into trying to get 3 in a row. We poured everything into doing something never been done, and we didn't do it. And I could see the letdown from that being really strong and really hard to come out of.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Joined by my good friend Colt Booth, who's a Chiefs fan. Last thing for real this time. I hate asking this question because it's dumb, but it's like this is sports radio, so I have to ask it. What does this do for the Tom Brady Mahomes comparison and the Bill Belichick Andy Reid comparison?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about the Belichick Reid comparison because for me that's just so like not a conversation. It's Belichick because like, you know, everybody be like, oh, well, what did Belichick do without Brady? Dude, what did any great coach do without a great quarterback, right? Like it's you kind of have to have them. For the Brady Mahomes thing, I was thinking about this before the game, and because we were talking about maybe me coming on if they won, and obviously knowing that was going to be a big part of the conversation, and still a conversation after this. And people point to, well, Brady never got blew out twice in the Super Bowl, and Brady beat Mahomes in the Super Bowl, and so I think the biggest thing is, Mahomes is still very young when this happens to him. But I'm really interested in this thing we have around greatness, where I remember when Brady was winning, we were really hesitant to say he was the greatest ever. It was like, no, Brady can't do it. The first ones, that was all Belichick. That wasn't Brady. Everybody's credit. And then we collectively got to a point pretty much after the Atlanta Super Bowl of like, okay, fine, he's the greatest. And then it's like, okay, well, now we'll die for him, even though no one wanted him to be the greatest. And the next person comes up and it's no, you can't be the best. And I don't know what it is about people in sports, but yeah, with Mahomes, I mean, if they had won this game, Chiefs fans would have been saying, hey, he's the greatest ever. And everybody had been like, oh, well, he needs to win 7 or he needs to win 8 or whatever it may be. I don't know. Like, Mahomes is not going to win 7 or 8. Like, just you look at it's probably not going to happen. Reed's going to retire. What's going to happen to this team? You can't compete at the highest level forever. There's going to be a downswing at some point. Do I think he's the best quarterback I've ever seen? Yes. I think he is the best to do it. Is he the greatest? No. There's something to be said for Brady's longevity and whatnot. But I don't know. Of course, people who dislike Chiefs fans are going to love a Chiefs fan being like, oh, shut up. I get everybody wants to gloat about the Chiefs losing, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really think it does anything to the legacy. People will use it, but the only people who will use it is the people who've already made up their mind on what their argument is. If you already decided Brady was the GOAT, then you're going to say this proves that Mahomes isn't Brady. And if you've decided that Mahomes is the GOAT, then you're going to say, well, he had no offensive line and it wasn't his fault. And so I don't think a single person changed their mind on this game of what their decision was going to be on that argument.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like, that's the way that these arguments go. Like no one changes their mind. At least very rarely do people. Last thing for real this time. I might just keep doing this for the rest of the night. Who knows? Does this prove that the NFL is not rigged?
I was worried. I texted you after the first offensive pass interference, and I was like, well, they could win by 80, and everybody's going to say it doesn't count. And so, yeah, I'm glad that the refs weren't a factor in this game either way, right? Like,
agreed. Yeah.
Like somebody, Zach texted me, and one of his friends said something about like, oh, the Chiefs have actually been against, or the refs have been against the Chiefs. And it's like, oh, we would have lost by 30 if the refs had, yeah, no, the NFL's not rigged. It never was. The refs were, never wanting the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl or anything like that. But I understand people disliking it. I get it. But
yeah. I mean, I had to ask. The refs thing bothers me more than any other conversation in sports. It drives me crazy. Colt, it's late. Thanks for staying up and being willing to talk about the game.
Absolutely. I got one more thing real quick. For all the people that hate the Chiefs, I actually don't feel that bad. Like, I'm glad it was a blowout. You just get it over with easier. If you really want Chiefs fans to hurt, you were wishing for a close game that they lost at the last second. And so, you know what? We're going to come back. We're going to be good to go. And I'm actually feeling good. This is actually a good thing for the Chiefs because now they have motivation for next year.
There you go. Even though, to be fair, like, if the game was close, the Chiefs are going to win. Like, they've won 17 straight one-score games for a reason.
That's true.
That's
true.
That's the reality of it. Colt, thanks for your time, man.
Yeah, absolutely, buddy. You have a good night.
See ya. That was my good buddy Colt Booth. Huge Chiefs fan. Great friend of mine as well. Once again, thanks to him for taking the time to talk about the Super Bowl. When we come back here in about a couple minutes or so, Matt Painter had quite the quote after the game against USC. I will play that for you when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. The real Jonathan Smith Show. This is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? It's the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you had a nice weekend. Purdue, Friday night, just taking USC to the woodshed. I thought USC would give Purdue at least kind of a hard time. They didn't. The Yates kid for USC went crazy. He scored 30 on 11 or 22 shooting, but no one else for USC really got going. Purdue just had their way, as they seem to always do. I mean, they're just absolutely rolling right now, and it doesn't really seem to matter what their opponents do. Then again, they've got some tougher games coming up here on their schedule. They go to Michigan tomorrow. And then they host Wisconsin, I believe, on Saturday, whatever day the 15th is. So, man, Purdue just absolutely rolling. Braden Smith with another awesome game. He didn't score a ton, only had 9 points, but he had 13 assists, only 3 turnovers. Trey Kaufman-Renn continues to be dominant. 24 points, 10 rebounds, just getting to his spot and scoring consistently. I mean, he just absolutely dominated. 24 points on 8 of 12 shooting, hit 8 of his 9 free throws as well, which is a big deal for him. And he was the topic of a question after the game. The question was asked kind of poorly. I believe that the reporter who was asking the question was asking something about Trey Kaufman-Renn not being on like the top 10 watch list for the Karl Malone Award or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award, whatever award that they give out to the best big men in the country. Trey Kaufman-Renn was not on the watch list for it. Matt Painter was asked about it, and he was pretty upset. And you can just tell that Matt Painter has a distaste for the people who vote on awards like this. Here's Matt Painter talking about Trey Kaufman-Renn being left off the top 10 watch list for the Karl Malone Award.
No, it's like anything. Like if you're an English professor, you should be good at English, right? And so if you're selecting these teams, like with the best power forward, the best center, like last year, Braden didn't make the top 10 point guards in the country, but then yet he made the top 5. So like there's an opportunity there when they make mistakes like they've made here. I don't know whether they're putting him on the Karl Malone or the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter because they proved last year when they made that mistake with Braden, they can put him on that top 5. So I just expect that you would think after they talked about the Karl Malone that happened 2 days ago, that now they would like reconvene and like kind of go through it. But there was 2 different point guard camps last year for the national, where they invited 15 to 16 point guards in the country coming into college and been in college. And I couldn't get Braden Smith in either one of those. And I'm saying, hey, man, I'm not saying he's a top 15 point guard in the country. I'm saying he's the best point guard in the country. I go like, you're leaving the best point guard out of the country. It's like having the NBA All-Star game and saying, hey, you know what? The 2 top guys that are going to be MVPs, you're not an all-star. It makes no sense. It just makes no sense. But you have non-basketball people making basketball decisions, and they look at it differently. Then they stereotypically look at somebody who's 5'11", like he's not a player, and he's real. Like he's one of the best passers ever. He can end up being the best passer ever. In terms of like what he does and how he has accumulated assists throughout his career. But yeah, the same kind of holds true for like Trey. Like what's he supposed to do? Right? He's the 5th or 6th most efficient player in college basketball right now. Like you can't make up the numbers that he has. But the thing that I don't grab is like whether it's Braden or whether it's him, like how they can't acknowledge it when you win big. Like if you have big time numbers and your team stinks, like I got it. Or your team wins all the time and your numbers are very, modest. They both have big time numbers. And obviously Braden's not in that, sphere anymore. Right. But he is. And so like, I just don't understand when you win at a very, very high level and you have those numbers and you're productive and you're the 4th, 5th, 6th most efficient player in the country, whatever the damn stat is. But, to each their own, that's on them. Really. It's on them because they're showing that they don't understand the game and what matters.
Matt Painter, Purdue head coach right there, talking about the people who vote for these awards, just laying them out. I love Coach Painter. He's the best. Like, he is, man. That was great. So he was talking there about Trey Kaufman-Renn not being on one of these award watch lists and talking about Braden Smith being left off of the top 10 list last year for, like the best point guards in the country. And then they put him on the top 5 list, which, that doesn't make any sense. And he is exactly right when he's talking about Trey Kaufman-Renn and Braden Smith. Like, Trey Kaufman-Renn is one of the 10 best power forwards in the country. There's no doubt about it. The way he scores it, he rebounds well. He's a decent defender. He had 2 blocks in that game against USC on Friday night. And Braden Smith is the best point guard in the country. The fact that he wasn't invited to some camp where they highlight the best point guards in the country is kind of ridiculous. And he said something interesting in that clip, and it's the second time I've heard him say something like this. He mentioned how people look at Braden Smith and they think he's not a player because he's 5'11". I don't think he's 5'11". I got to be honest. I think he's like 5'9". Seriously. And he's not a great athlete. And people look at that and they discredit him a little bit. And then on Dan's show, he mentioned how a lot of those high school rankings, this is Coach Painter saying this, he mentioned how a lot of those high school rankings aren't about how good you are at basketball. They're about how athletic you are. And I myself, I fall into this trap all the time. It's very easy to fall in love with size and athleticism in every sport because sports are about being athletic to some degree. And being athletic is important in just about every single sport. But it's not everything. And we're seeing that with Purdue this year. Braden Smith is an anomaly at this point in the world of basketball to be that undersized, and unathletic is not the right word, but to lack the explosiveness physically to make up for that lack of size and still be this dominant is incredible. Trey Kaufman-Renn, 6'8", not super explosive, but still finishes well and has good touch and knows where to be. This is not an overly athletic Purdue basketball team. It's not. And that's okay. Who cares when you're winning games at the rate that Purdue is? And when you look at some of the other best teams in the country, they're the total opposite. Auburn's very athletic. Duke, NBA players, NBA athletes all over their roster. Alabama's pretty athletic. Florida, very athletic. Texas A&M, very explosive. Just a lot of high jumpers on that team. And then you have Purdue, who's probably going to be ranked somewhere in the top 5 today, whenever those rankings come out. And they are just the total opposite. Good, sound, fundamental basketball, guys in the right spot, guys who know how to dribble, pass, and shoot. They've got a couple good athletes, but they don't have any great ones. And they're just out here beating everybody. And that's ultimately what really matters. And Coach Painter hitting the nail on the head once again. He just does such an excellent job of answering these questions. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, I have to talk about Chris Ballard. Got to do it. I have to talk about Chris Ballard because he must have just loved watching that game last night. And I'm going to tell you why when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Drivers who switch and save with Progressive could save hundreds. With that kind of money, you could go big time on a fancy water bottle with ultra titanium alloy metal. You're not sure why you need all that. I mean, it just holds water, but you're getting it anyway. Because if you're hiking near an active volcano and you accidentally drop the bottle into molten lava, your water will still be icy cold. Switch to Progressive and you could save big time. For water bottles. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, not available in all states. Potential savings will vary.
Accomplishing goals is hard, but when your goal is to learn a new language, Babbel makes it easy. Babbel is designed with you in mind. From expert-created lessons to conversational video units and even live classes, you can personalize your Babbel experience to be exactly what you need to really learn a new language more easily. Go ahead, set a goal for yourself. Accomplish it with Babbel. Try Babbel for free. Go to BABBEL.com. That's Babbel.com.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket. 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys are having a nice start to your week. Hopefully you had a nice weekend. Indiana fans, you probably didn't. Chris Ballard did, though. Chris Ballard had an absolute blast watching that game last night. I know that he did, because what the Eagles have built, what Howie Roseman has done there in Philadelphia is exactly what Chris Ballard has envisioned himself doing. I mean, just consistently. Like this is like what the Eagles have put together is what Chris Ballard wants for the Colts to look like. Like, where were the Eagles great last night? The trenches, the offensive line was dominant. The defensive line was dominant. What does Chris Ballard emphasize and talk about and preach about more than anything else? The offensive and defensive line. Where does he love to spend those first-round draft picks? What position does he seem to draft more of than anything else? Offensive and defensive linemen. He wants for the Colts to look like the Eagles so badly. So badly. He wants the Colts to look like that. 8 defensive linemen who can come in and rush the passer. An awesome offensive line. All those things. And when I look at the Eagles, in all seriousness, not saying that the Colts will ever be this, not saying that, the Colts are going to be this next year, just generally speaking, what the Eagles looked like last night is the peak version of what the Colts could be with Anthony Richardson as the starting quarterback. Okay, like the Colts, they don't have a great quarterback. I think that the best version of Anthony Richardson looks similar to Jalen Hurts. Okay, running a lot. Like Jalen Hurts ran the football 11 times last night, threw it 22 times. That's probably about where Anthony Richardson needs to be. Like, I think that's the peak Anthony Richardson pass to run ratio. Okay. And then there's just a ton of support around Jalen Hurts. There's an amazing offensive line. There's 2 great wide receivers and a great running back. And then just an amazing defense that, if Jalen Hurts did make a mistake, which he did, he threw a pick. Like, the defense was there to be able to make up for it. Okay, what the Eagles looked like last night, like, that is the dream for Chris Ballard. That is the dream. The issue is it's really hard to create that. You have to draft at such an elite level if you want to be able to be that good. Okay, like the Eagles drafted a lot of those defensive linemen, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. They drafted Devontae Smith. They drafted Jalen Hurts. They drafted Lane Johnson and their left tackle, Maliata, or however you say it. Okay, like you have to be elite at doing that. And Chris Ballard just isn't good enough at drafting for the Colts to ever look like that. But Howie Roseman deserves a huge raise. He is the best general manager in the NFL. He built that roster. He drafted incredibly well. He hired Vic Fangio. He hired Kellen Moore. Okay, and he did so many things that led to one of the most dominant performances we've seen in the history of the Super Bowl. It's not the most dominant. Okay, that is prisoner of the moment type stuff. We have to remember what the Broncos did to the Panthers and what the Seahawks did to the Broncos. I would argue that both of those performances were way more dominant than what we saw last night from the Chiefs and the Eagles. Either way, I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles, man, just an absolute unit on that side of the ball. Indiana basketball, not very good. Just, not very good at all. Indiana loses to Michigan by 3 on Saturday. Anthony Leal, big shout out to him for helping the Hoosiers cover on that half-court heave. This team is just not very good. Mike Woodson did his best to take some of the blame after the game. Here's Mike Woodson talking about where he's at fault in all of these IU basketball losses.
We haven't been the same team, for a while. And for whatever reasons, it's, we've dug a hole, and I've done a terrible job in really putting them in the best position possible to win, I think. And, but emotionally, these kids have taken a beating a little bit, and it's my job to try to lift their spirits and keep them heading in the right direction, man, because it's still a lot of basketball left. 7 games is a lot of games, man. And we're still trying to play to stay in the Big Ten tournament and then see where that takes us. But we got to start winning some games here soon to do that.
Darn right you do, Coach Woodson, right there talking about why this team hasn't been playing very well and how they're not in the right spots and just a lot of bad there in that clip. And Coach Woodson said that something that's just exactly right. Like, he has done a terrible job this year of putting players in the proper spots for them to be successful. Okay, like, he hasn't put players in the proper spots for them to have a chance to win. Like, that's clear as day. It's incredibly important for this team because they're very talented. Like, they are. Anthony Leal played 32 minutes. He's a starter, and his minutes are like important. Okay, and then you look at another team in the state, a team in Purdue that doesn't have a ton of talent on their roster either, but they're always in the right spot. Like, Purdue doesn't have a player on their roster that is a certified first-round NBA draft pick, going to play in the league for 10 years. Okay, their best player is an undersized point guard who struggles at times when size and athleticism is put on him. But they win a ton of games because their players are always in the right spot, and they are only asked to do the things that they are good at doing. And then you look at IU, and their players are just never in the right spot. That is on Coach Woodson. Like, you can play 2 bigs together in college basketball and be successful. It is possible. It is. You just have to find a way to make sure that they don't get in each other's way offensively, and you have to be sure that they're athletic enough to guard on the defensive end of the floor. And Mike Woodson hasn't figured that out. He hasn't. Okay, the Hoosiers got crushed in that first half against Michigan. They weren't making shots. They weren't getting stops. They were down 43-27 at half. I turned it off. I was like, yeah, I'm done. Had to go back and watch it later because I was just kind of expecting them to roll over. And to their credit, they didn't roll over. They fought back, had a chance late, but they just dug themselves into too deep of a hole there in the first half. And I was surprised at how they fought back. Seriously, I just very, very surprised. Like, it seemed like this was the game when everyone finally folded. Okay, and I got to be honest, like, it was nice seeing them compete a little bit, but this team isn't talented enough to overcome 17-point deficits against teams as good as Michigan. Anthony Leal is like, he's an important player, which I think is revealing as to how untalented this team is. He's having to start and play 30 minutes a night. And he's just not a great player. Like, sure, he's got some nights where he hits a couple shots, but he's really just a good defender who doesn't offer much offensively. He doesn't even look at the basket some nights. You know, like, they rely on Trey Galloway to score. Like, he's had 1 year in his 5-year career where he's averaged double figures. Miles Rice was supposed to make the IU engine go. Okay, IU fans will never forget that scrimmage against Tennessee when apparently Miles Rice was great. But now he's played his way out of the rotation. He played 12 minutes against Michigan. He got pulled against Purdue as well. Like, he's just not a Big Ten player. Mackenzie Mbako is the only legitimately talented player on this team. He's the only guy that, as of late, has consistently looked like a Big Ten player. Omar Ballo has really just kind of disappeared since that game against Purdue. Malik Renew's been up and down, played well against Michigan, led them in scoring, but he hasn't consistently looked like a Big Ten power forward this year. Then again, part of that's probably part of the injury, but still, this team lacks talent. They lack coaching. They lack consistency. And when you don't have those things, you aren't going to win games. Like, you aren't, no matter how talented you are. And, you know, Luke Goody made a comment earlier in the year about how talented this IU team is. And Coach Woodson was asked why the supposed talent that this team hasn't translated to wins. Here's what Indiana head basketball coach Mike Woodson had to say about that.
I wish I knew, as the coach, your roster's changing every year, and that's no excuse. And you think you putting the right pieces in play. And I think our guys got wonderful intentions, man, and they do want to win. But it hadn't worked out that way the last 3-4 weeks for our ball club. So, my job again as the coach is to continue to push them and keep them in a good frame of mind, and hopefully something good will click. And we need to get a game under their belt so they can start feeling good about themselves.
Mike Woodson right there talking about this poor Indiana basketball team that can't be anybody. Look, first, of course your team wants to win. Everyone wants to win. No one walks through life and competes in anything and is like, you know what? I want to lose. It doesn't happen. Okay. Second, your roster didn't change that much. You made that comment in there about how rosters change every year. Malik Renew, your leading scorer, is back from last year. Mackenzie Mbako, Big Ten Freshman of the Year, is back from last year. You've had Trey Galloway every year that you've been there. You've had Anthony Leal every year that you've been there. The only guys that are new are Omar Ballo, Miles Rice, Bryson Tucker, and Kanan Carlisle. And Miles Rice has played less and less. Bryson Tucker's missed a bunch of time with the pinky issue, and Kanan Carlisle has played his way out of the rotation. Like those are the only 4 guys that have even kind of played some this year. It's just another poor excuse from Coach Woodson. Hopefully, whoever the Hoosiers bring in next to be the head coach can figure out, that rosters change every year and that's part of college basketball. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to listen to my show. I greatly appreciate it. I'll be on again tomorrow from 10 to noon. Make sure you check it out. Make sure you head over to YouTube, subscribe to Indy's Sports Ticket. We stream the show there every day. Thank you again for tuning in. I'll talk to you tomorrow from 10 to noon. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way here in about 5 minutes.